London, home to many kinds of transport, from the iconic to the much less conventional. Yet, by 2021, the UK government is set to introduce a new, controversial mode of transport: the autonomous car. With one of London's biggest taxi firms closing a deal to bring a fleet of autonomous cars to the city, the reality of driverless cars on our roads seems all the more tangible. Further across the pond, these vehicles have been nothing short of scandalous, with many questioning the practicality, safety, and ethicality around their use. Others, however, argue that these vehicles could offer a much greener future and could be revolutionary in combating the problems of car emissions and traffic congestion. Which begs the question, how will these cars integrate into London? Is our city ready for them? Are they needed? And do we even want them? So, how does London feel about driverless cars coming to the capital?
Revolutionary.
Future.
Not happy about them.
I love it. Quite frankly, pointless. Efficient. Unsafe.
A little bit worrying.
Amazing.
Really cool.
And apocalypse.
Would you trust a driverless car?
No. Not no. Yes, of course.
No. Not at the moment.
No, not at the moment.
No.
I think so, I would.
I'd rather have control over what I'm driving, so, I wouldn't trust it at all, to be honest.
The public are clearly undecided, so we have come to the source to get an expert opinion. Dr Jack Stilgoe is a leading social scientist on self-driving cars at University College London.
So 10 years ago it was impossible, the idea of a self-driving car, and now it is being talked about as though it's inevitable. So that's extraordinary. However, we shouldn't get too mesmerised about where the technology might take us. Rather than starting with the technology, we should instead start with a question of what we would like the world to look like in the future. What sort of world do we want to live in? That's a big question of politics, and it puts technology in its place. At the moment, policy is pretty threadbare. Right? There isn't much thinking on what we need to do in order to make sure that we realise the benefits of self-driving cars while having them arrive in a safe and sustainable way. I think governments should get ahead of this and start trying to articulate some idea of what they want from this technology, rather than just letting the technology push them into making decisions. But the British government have started some conversations. Is London ready for self-driving cars? Well, I think no city is ready for self-driving cars, because cities were designed for other things. Which isn't to say that self-driving cars couldn't fit in particular cities, but you can imagine that there are easier cities and harder cities to make them work in. So if you look at the actual ethics of a decision involving a self-driving car, we had this summer a crash in which an Uber self-driving Volvo killed a woman. And there was actually a value-based engineering decision that said, we think that safety is less important than ensuring a smooth ride in one of these cars.
We also spoke to Susan Claris, a specialist in urban transport planning.
For me, there is huge amounts of uncertainty over the introduction of driverless cars. There are some very ambitious claims out there that they could be introduced in 2 or 3 years on London streets. If I look at the streets on my walk here today, I can't see autonomous vehicles operating in those busy streets. Certainly not if we're going to maintain healthy streets that are for walking and cycling and maintain public transport. And I think there's a real fear that a new technology could come in and actually detract from that. So I think we need to start looking at autonomous vehicles from the position of the street and what works in the street, as opposed to looking at it from the technology of the vehicle and what might be achievable for the vehicle. And also actually recognising or starting to look whether people really want these vehicles. A lot of people like driving and they like owning things. I think the area of consultation and transport is a really interesting one. So stakeholder engagement is generally seen as a bit of something that has to happen. There's been too much of a mentality of deciding what to do and then going out to the public and defending it. I've done that myself, where you're doing public consultations in drafty village halls for people that actually don't want what you're proposing. And I think we need to shift it away from thinking about consultation, instead to think about it as more like market research. Elsewhere, in other sectors, you wouldn't introduce a new product or change something without doing some market research. That's seen as something valuable, whereas consultation is often seen as something negative to be endured.
So where does that leave us in regards to autonomous cars? Well, they could be introduced as early as next year, and with the current information and public perception, it leaves many fearful of that prospect. Technology companies claim they can achieve true autonomous driving on London roads today. The government has set a date for its introduction, yet you and I know almost nothing of what is proposed or available. How that will be received, affect its use and affect us, we will have to wait and see.